welcome to another Take 5. I'm spending some time this morning with Ron Kirk, and we are at his garage, and we are looking at his 1933 Dodge pickup. This 1933 Dodge pickup is a beautiful vehicle. You just have to marvel and love the vintage look of this truck. Everything original. What a joy to be able to be around a vehicle like this. Sitting here in this classic truck, I realize a couple of things. Number one, newer doesn't always mean better. This is a classic truck, and it's the kind of truck that'll never go out of style. You know what? We live in a world where we always do think newer is better and older, no good. Not true with this truck, and I tell you what, not true with God's Word. There is a message in God's Word that is very relevant today. A message in God's Word that doesn't go out of style. A message in God's Word that has power. A message in God's Word that can transform lives. A message in God's Word that can bring you and I hope forever. The reality is, every single one of us has been separated from God because of our sin. And yet, God has loved us so much that He would send His Son into this world to die for you and I. He rose from the dead 3 days later. He now sits at the right hand of God. And one day, He is coming back for you and I. There is a message that never goes out of style. There is a message that is just as needed today as it ever was. And while some preachers may trade in God's Word for fame, maybe some preachers will trade in God's Word for acceptance, to draw big crowds, to water down the message so they don't offend anybody, none of that changes what God's Word is. It is real, it is true, it is relevant, it is powerful, and it's needed to be heard today more than ever. It's one of the things I love so much about God's Word, just how very timeless it is. To think about how many lives it's changed over the centuries, over the history of mankind, and to realize that today God's Word is still changing lives. People can look to so many different sources for hope, for guidance, for strength, but nothing provides it quite like God's Word. I mean, we realize that whatever we're dealing with, God's Word has the answers. If it's anxiety, God's Word has the answer. If it's fear, God's Word has the answer. If it's problems in our relationship, God's Word has the answer. If it's wrestling with finances and material possessions, God's Word has the answer. If it's addiction, God's Word has the answer. If it's even our health, God's Word has the answer. I know that God's will and my prayer is that you and I would be people of His Word, that we would cling to His Word, that we would trust His Word, we would know His Word, we would be obedient to His Word, we would proclaim His Word. The world needs it. You and I need His Word in our lives so that we can be growing closer to Christ and more like Christ every day of our lives. And so let's be people of His Word. Ron, thank you for taking the time today to let us see this beautiful classic 1933 Dodge pickup. It's been a joy. Ron, thank you for taking the time today to show us your beautiful truck and letting... One more time. So bad.